Today was one of the fastest days in the history of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but there's so much more to discuss than just speed. Perhaps it's lack of speed, bump day drama, who will go home. There's so many things to discuss. Let's get into it. So as you might be able to tell, weather is coming, and that's going to be a huge factor tomorrow. We'll talk about some of the issues that all of the teams are facing, as well as some issues that only some of the teams are facing tomorrow in qualifying. I stood up here, ironically enough, in 2019 when we talked about one of the biggest bumps that's ever happened here, way before it actually happened, Fernando Alonso in 2019. And it's kind of ironic that we're discussing the team that eventually ended up bumping them, Juncos Hollinger Racing, in today's video when we're talking about the potentiality of bump day affecting. And it is pouring right now. In fact, I'm going to have Kyle pull that camera around. This is happening right now. This is live coverage. And I'll tell you what, I feel sorry for the crews, number one. But this is all the rubber going off of the track. And we talked about rubber on the racing surface yesterday. The fact that tire wear is going to be an issue, we'll talk about that in just a bit. But the fact that it is absolutely pouring rain right now. It's going to be a green track tomorrow when the drivers and teams come out for practice at 8 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. So without any further ado, let's look first at the top speeds of the day. That doesn't matter too much because there's some there were some drivers who got a tow today. You'll know who they are when I mention them. But mainly, we're going to take a look at the 4-lap averages of each of the drivers in the field because that's going to give us the best indication of what to expect in qualifying tomorrow. And the fast 6 overall today, Takuma Sato with the fastest lap at Indianapolis since 1996, 234.7 miles per hour. Second on the board, and some people were kind of confused as to why Marco Andretti would do a tow lap to get 234.2 miles an hour. Well, it makes sense because he got a better qualifying draw out of that. He will roll off 5th tomorrow. Rinus VeeKay in 3rd position at 234.1. Marcus Ericsson at 234 dead. Pato O'Ward at 233.7. Joseph Newgarden at 233.7 as well. But this is the real statistic that is perhaps the most interesting. The 4-lap averages for today, the fastest was Takuma Sato at 233.4 miles per hour. Second was Marcus Ericsson at 233.1. Fourth was Joseph Newgarden at 233 dead. Will Power also at 233 dead. The Penske cars very, very consistent. Rinus VeeKay at 232.8. Colton Herta at the same average. Again, 4-lap averages here we're talking about. Felix Rosenqvist in P7 at 232. Kyle Kirkwood 232.6. Alexander Rossi 232.5, Scott Dixon 232.4, Alex Palou 232.3. It's super consistent throughout the field. Then we go and look at Scott McLaughlin 233.3. I think you're noticing a pattern here. It's that the field is extremely close. 13th, Pato O'Ward 232.3, Romain Grosjean 232.2. Augustine Canapino, and it's interesting because Juncos is very much the subject of bump day. Well, they're not necessarily with car 78. His 4-lap average is at 232 miles an hour. Connor Daly put it in the barn early today at 232.0. Marco Andretti a little bit slower than his fastest lap at 231.9. Santino Ferrucci also in that range. Ryan Hunter-Reay in 19th, who will go first, and you'll hear from later in this video. Simon Pagenaud at 231. Ditto for Tony Kanaan and Helio Castroneves, the two oldest drivers in the race. If they win, they will be the oldest winners ever. Ed Carpenter put it in the barn early at 231.6. Devlin DeFrancesco, who's been good on the no-tow times throughout the week, at 231. David Malukas for Dale Coyne Racing. Benjamin Peterson, who's been consistent. Ironically, I thought his 4-lap average would have been better than that, but here he is in 26th. Stefan Wilson for Dreyer Reinbold. Catherine Legg in 28th. The best Rahal qualifying car, as said by Graham Rahal, proved true today. Stingray Robb in 29th for the rookie. 30th for Christian Lundgaard. 31st for Graham Rahal, 32nd for Jack Harvey, who blew an engine earlier today. We'll talk about that. R.C. Anderson, had they qualified today, would have been 33rd and the final car in the show at 2:30.2. And Callum Ilott was unable to complete a 4-lap average today due to chassis problems. Well, we had to make a bit of an adjustment. It's raining so hard that we didn't want to get the camera wet. Understandable. We talked to Ryan Hunter-Reay a couple of days ago, but I asked him about qualifying. He'll be rolling off first tomorrow. This is what he had to say about making a car fast around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Well, it's always a trade-off between, trimming off enough drag to go fast and, in a straight line, so to speak, versus sliding too much to the corner, You have to trim these things out to go fast, but there's also the other side, whereas if you start trimming out too much and you start really sliding the car and eating up too much racetrack, it can slow you down. So you're just trying to find that happy medium, and trying to find out what combination of mechanical changes and aero changes suit us, each driver. And qual trim.
Will Power drew third in the qualifying draw today. Team Penske looks resurgent at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. They've been nowhere the past couple of years. I asked Will Power about what it's going to take to be fast once again. What was the deficiency, or what has been the deficiency the last couple of years? I mean, what have you guys struggled with getting up to pace?
It's been many, many things. Like, it'd blow your mind if you knew the amount of different things that we've developed and had to work on. It's never just one thing. It simply is never just one thing in this sport. It's a spec car, so it's a lot of little tiny things that add up.
And it wouldn't be a Fast Friday without a bunch of issues for a bunch of teams. And when we're talking about bump day, Lord have mercy, do these issues become much, much more serious. The first I want to talk about is Juncos Hollinger Racing. Now, the first car, the lead car, I guess we'll call it, rookie Agustin Canapino, has really had a trouble-free week up until this point. He's been quick. He's been able to put together consistent lap speeds. And yet, his teammate, more experienced here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Callum Ilott, has not. These troubles have stemmed from the test here in April. For whatever reason, their chassis has too much flex in it, and they were not able to complete very many laps at all in April. They've come back here in May with the same chassis, thought they fixed the issue. They did not. 3 days of practice, essentially, down the drain. They have rolled out Agustin Canapino's backup car, which did test here in April. Agustin is in a different chassis, as reported by NBC, and Callum Ilott is going to have to qualify if they can't get that car prepared for tomorrow with a car he's never driven a lap in. And for the 78T car, I guess we'll call it, the backup car for Agustin Canapino, I mean, this is a massive story. And very quickly, unfortunately, Callum Ilott is sitting there, number one, likely to get bumped, which is through no fault of his own. Sometimes this happens. Cars get screwed up, but amazing to me that the team that bumped out McLaren in 2019 is having these types of issues. I mean, they were more well prepared than McLaren in 2019. They got in the show, McLaren didn't. The shoe is on the other foot now, and I'm very curious as to why the decision was made with the chassis today. I'm very curious as to why the decision was made, because the way I look at it, with some question of reliability both on the tire and engine side, inconsistency on both, especially with the Honda cars. If you could do 4 laps at 228 miles an hour, even if you're in the last row shootout, if someone crashes or blows a motor or has the same issue that you do and have to go to a backup car, you kind of committed at this point to your primary car. Switching to a backup car in this era is so difficult because you're not allowed to put a backup motor in your backup chassis. They have to convert all of the things from the primary car to the backup car. Why this decision wasn't made on Wednesday night, I have no idea. And so they've kind of they've made a decision, and I guess we're going to find out if it's going to pay off for them. Augustine Canapino has shown immense speed, and maybe you can throw Augustine's setup on Callum's backup car, or I guess Augustine's backup car, and it will go the same. But there's a lot more drama for the Juncos Hollinger team than I think anybody thought going into this month. And that's the second point when we're talking in regards to bump day. Honda, we talked about this. I mentioned this in the Grand Prix. It looks like Honda's having some engine issues, and that reared its ugly head again. A very public engine failure down the back straightaway for Jack Harvey today. Rahal is one of those teams that people are looking at as a potential team that's going to be on the bump list. Jack Harvey, that's the last thing this guy needed after really having a fairly solid month up until this point. Now you've got to change the engine. Hopefully it's got the same ponies as the one you just blew up. But as I understand it, Jack Harvey's engine was not the only Honda that blew up at the end of the session. Now, do I have 100% confirmation? Yeah, no. Did I ask about it? Yes. I'll just say this. A very, very significant Honda team had at least 2 engines pop before the end of the session. You might have heard an interview with Scott Dixon that gave you some hints to that. I'll just say that, which of course gives it away, but we're not exactly subtle here. And that's the thing, guys. As we look ahead to bump day, you can't just look at even Juncos and say, well, they're the ones who are going home. I mean, it's a crash or an engine failure in an untimely point. You're that close to missing out on the Indianapolis 500. So this is going to be one hell of a show. And really, quite frankly, there's no easy bump right now. Before we get into the final segment of this show, I want to send it over to our history segment for today, because qualifying at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is always a bit unique. And more often than not, the fastest car in the field isn't actually the pole sitter. We have that story right now. One of the unique aspects of the Indianapolis 500 is its qualifying format, and while the intricacies have changed over the years, the tradition of the Indy 500 time trials in their simplest terms is that the starting grid is made up of the fastest 33 cars over a 4-lap average. That being said, those fastest 33 are rarely, if ever, arranged fastest to slowest, even to the point that 18 times in the 500 history, the car that started on the pole was not the fastest in the race. It only took until the second Indianapolis 500 for this to occur. 1912 was the first year that average speeds in time trials were recorded, but despite setting the fastest qualifying speed, David Bruce Brown's sizzling 88-mile-per-hour average placed him 8th on the grid. As in the early years of the 500, the grid was set not by qualifying speed, but by how quickly the entry blank to the race was filled. Gil Anderson of Norway scored the pole position by being quickest to his mailbox. Other famous examples include 1960, when rookie Jim Hurtubise stunned the Speedway faithful, nearly breaking the 150-mile-per-hour barrier and setting the track record at 149.6 miles per hour. But because he qualified on the second weekend of time trials, he would roll off 23rd. An early wave-off and an afternoon rainstorm late on pole day in 1991 prevented Gary Bettenhausen's faster 224.4 miles per hour from knocking Team Penske's Rick Mears off the pole. Gary B. would start a lucky 13th. Arie Luyendyk initially qualified on the front row for the 1996 Indy 500 at 233 miles per hour, but when his car was found to be underweight, the run was disallowed. Arie re-qualified the next day to set the outright 1- and 4-lap track records. His record average of 236.9 miles per hour still stands today, but because Arie was a second-day qualifier, he rolled off 20th. The most recent example came in 2005 when Buddy Rice broke his back in a crash on the Wednesday before pole qualifying. The Rahal Letterman team named 1999 winner Kenny Brack as Rice's replacement, but he didn't qualify the car until the second weekend. Brack went faster than pole sitter Tony Kanaan at 227.5, but started 22nd. The possibility still exists for the Indy 500 pole man to not be the fastest driver in the field thanks to the Fast 12 qualifying format. If Sunday's track conditions are significantly slower, the 13th place car would be the fastest in the field. Or with the last row shootout, the possibility exists. If a fast enough car ends up missing day one of qualifying for some reason, they could qualify faster than the pole sitter, but still start on the last row. Tomorrow we'll talk more qualifying oddities, namely the story of the name Smith at the Indy 500.
The fastest 33 cars ever to race anywhere, anytime, roll away from the starting line. Their average.
And finally, once again, the big factor for all the teams, when we're not just being specific, when we're talking about Juncos or we're talking about the Honda teams, all the teams are struggling with the tires right now. Whether they're going to admit that publicly or not, probably not going to admit that publicly. But we do know that Firestone brought a softer compound tire to the track this year. And what that means is more inconsistency in qualifying. We've seen throughout the 4-lap runs today, you do 2 laps and they're really fast, and then all of a sudden the fall off is there. So qualifying very much is going to be about who can keep the tires underneath them, who can be consistently fast, not necessarily just go out there and run 235 miles an hour, because chances are your last couple of laps are going to be 229 or 228. So the unpredictability is absolutely unbelievable. It's not just about speed, it's about consistency, it's about staying off the walls, and oh, by the way, I hope your engine doesn't blow up. So I can't wait. I'm sure you guys can't either. We'll have a full report on pole day. It's not pole day. First day of qualifying. We need to change that. Let's do pole day and bump day again, please. Day 1 of qualifying tomorrow. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be early, and the action is going to be insane. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.